Fellow Falcoholics, what is up? Welcome to episode 323 of the Falcoholic Live. I'm your host, Kevin Knight at Falcoholic Kevin, joined by, it feels like it's been a minute since we've just had a classic Adnan Ikic, Kevin Knight program here. Obviously, Adnan was out for a little while, and then when you came back last week, we had some guests. So it's time. It's time for us to get back together here and get our draft takes going for you guys here. But before we dive into these Falcons draft takes, of which I'm sure you guys are eager to hear us dive into some of these outlandish claims and these crazy rumors that we're hearing and whether or not we think the Falcons are actually going to do any of these things or not, want to welcome in Adnan Ikic at Say Which Way. Adnan, welcome back. How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing well. Hey, man, at the end of the day, the hosts or the guests come and go, but it's us who are here in the middle of June,
Yep.
staring down another dead period and then into the season. So, going back to the basics tonight.
Oh, yeah. No, we're sort of like the Thanos of Falcons commentators. We're just inevitable, and we'll be there. When everyone else is gone, then we'll be there, and we can look back upon a grateful universe. I just watched Endgame recently, in case you guys didn't know. But
Grateful
yes,
universe in a below 500 season.
well, that's also inevitable, unfortunately. But before we get to covering, that eventuality, we do have a draft ahead of us, which could theoretically be a good thing for this team. It should be a good thing for this team, even though the Falcons only have the 5 picks right now, 2 of which are 7th rounders. They do have a top 15 pick and 2 top 50 picks, including their 2nd rounder. They don't have a 3rd rounder. But they have the potential to trade down, which is one of the rumors we're going to talk about today, along with some other stuff, including some interesting visits that the team has had. We're going to be getting into all that. If you guys have spicy draft rumors that you'd like us to talk about, feel free to throw those out there, and we'll try to get to as many of those tonight as we can, and just sort of give you guys our sort of not final draft takes. We got 2 more Wednesday shows before the draft itself, and those are the busiest times for the rumor mill, but sort of give you guys like our thoughts as we're kind of honing in on what we're hearing and sort of what we're thinking and feeling going in to the last couple of weeks before the draft. We're almost there, Adnan. Are you getting excited?
Yeah. Look, it's that time of year, right? The only thing is, I'm just slightly less excited given the lack of draft picks. So, this time last year, this time 2 years ago, you're going into it, kind of feels like when you have that full set of picks, there's so much more that you're looking forward to. There's so much more you're looking at of like, all right, maybe we can fill this need. We can fill this need. Like, we can get a specialist for this. And now, we're going into it like, 3rd rounder was blown on Matthew Judon. The 5th rounder was blown by Kirk Cousins having a big mouth. And, we're just sort of 2 7th rounders, which aren't really, let's be honest, they never really amount to much here and there. But, it is exciting, hopefully seeing the team address some needs, hopefully seeing the team address the defense. It's an exciting time for everyone. It's just one of those things where when you don't have as much ammunition, the excitement gets a little lower in comparison to, let's say the teams that do have a full treasure chest of picks.
Yeah. It's tough, and I think obviously the way things ended last season, I think it's just put a damper on everyone's enthusiasm about this regime and the team, and I don't blame anyone for that. But it just seems like it's kind of the state of things here in Atlanta, which just there's not a lot of faith right now, and I don't blame people for that whatsoever. But before we get into this, guys, I want to bring you a real quick word from my bookie, folks. March Madness is unfortunately over. Exciting tournament. Not a lot of upsets. I know our own Alan Stirk was crushed when St. John's actually had an early exit. I was pulling for St. John's all the way. Unfortunately, that ended early. So we got Florida versus Houston. Good game. Florida ends up taking it. But the Masters are back, people. There's money to be made there, along with UFC 314 coming up. We've got golf's most iconic tournament and also big fights going on with the UFC. And MyBookie is, of course, the ultimate spot to cash in on every swing, upset, and Sunday charge. No matter what you're looking at, if you're new to MyBookie, there's a new promotion that you're going to want to take advantage of. You can deposit any amount from $50 all the way up to $2,000 if you're really a high roller. It's probably more than I gamble in my entire life, but, well, maybe I shouldn't say that. I did go on a cruise at some point in the last 5 years where probably spent more than I should have at the cruise casinos. Don't spend money at the cruise casinos. That's something you should never do if we're going to, set rules here. But you can deposit anywhere from 50 up to $2,000, and you get half match instantly with our promo code, which is still MM50 for March Madness, but it still works. You can continue to use that code. There's no waiting. You don't need to bet to receive it. Just some bonus cash for you right away. If you think you've got a read on Augusta, the way things are going there, or maybe you want to take advantage of a Michael Chandler boost for UFC 314, now's the time to get it done. You can bet anything, anytime, anywhere, only with MyBookie. Thanks to those guys for sponsoring today's episode. And welcome in all of our chatters. We appreciate you guys too. Gats boy, Alex, I think is what that's supposed to be. Southside 12, what's up? OMT, everybody, thanks for coming in. And again, guys, if you don't mind liking and subscribing, we really appreciate that. If you're enjoying the show, throw your comments out there. I know we've got some rumors in the chat that we'll talk about as well. We're also going to get to some of the major ones that have been out there. So yeah, excited to dive in. So let's start with the recent one that I think has made a lot of people kind of nervous, which is the Falcons visiting with a bunch of offensive tackles. And again, I will say, guys, that visits don't mean that they're drafting the player. It may be that they just want to get more information about them or whatever. But they've started to sniff around a lot of offensive tackles, including some of the first round guys, notably Kelvin Banks from Texas, as well as Josh Connerly from Oregon, who saw at the Senior Bowl as well. They've sniffed around other tackles later in the draft, like Logan Brown from Kansas and some other guys. So, there seems to be a fair amount of smoke around this team looking into offensive tackle. It's not necessarily that strange given that McGary's now in the last year of his deal and he has not been extended yet. Obviously that could change too, but I kind of assumed that he would be extended early if it was going to happen, because that was one of the best ways to clear cap space, was to just extend McGary's contract out. But curious, Adnan, how seriously are you taking the offensive tackle early rumors, and is that something you're willing to buy into, or are you going to sell that one?
I mean, logic tells me that I want to sell it. Because,
Logic.
clearly, this team needs defense. This team needs a pass rusher. I understand, and look, I'm someone that has beaten the drum of offensive line every single year at around this time. Like every year, go back, watch, or that's actually that would take a long time. Nobody's going to do that. But if you went back and you watched, our draft shows leading up to the draft, I always am an advocate of solidifying the offensive line. I think those are, those are the most underrated guys on the football field. And I get it. I get the logic of, maybe you want a right tackle who's a little better than Caleb McGarry in the long term when it comes to pass protection, because that is going to be Michael Penix's blind side. Caleb McGarry's gotten a lot better at pass protection the past few years. Like, this isn't rookie year, second year Caleb McGarry. I know he still has this stigma among the fan base as this offensive line whipping boy, but he's every year he's improved. He's gotten, his run blocking has always been very good, but he's gotten very above average, I'd say, when it comes to pass protection. But I get it. The Falcons and Dolphins, the two most valuable right teams when it comes to looking for right tackles, because their quarterbacks are left-handed. But the Falcons sort of have forfeited this luxury of looking for a right tackle in the first round this year. I figured maybe that could be a thing after last year, after they got Penix last year. But given the fact that the pass rush has been so bad and so neglected. And given the fact that Terry Fontenot has missed on so many of his day two picks in particular, and the fact that, this team, you look down the depth chart, there's no comfort level when it comes to this pass rush. You have this need for the future if you don't like Caleb McGarry for right tackle, but then you have this need right now for a pass rusher. And the needs right now, I think, outweigh the needs that, could happen down the line. So logic tells me that you have to come away within this first round with the pass rusher. But unfortunately, I'm still buying into the smoke. Like with this team, this general manager has proven that he will, go against the grain, especially in the first round, year after year. He will prioritize offense over defense. And, I'm not going to fully discount the fact that they are, having these visits so late in the process. We were all discounting the possibility of them getting a quarterback last year, and they were meeting with Michael Penix very late in the process. It kind of feels like the same cycle is happening right now. I'm still going to hope that they come away with that, logic prevails and they go pass rusher. But if they went offensive tackle, would I be shocked on draft day? I refuse to let this team shock me anymore.
Never underestimate this team's ability to ignore the defense. That is something I have learned very, very deeply over the past, I don't know, ever since, at least since Arthur Smith took over. This team has neglected the defense in favor of the offense time and time again. And maybe that's for the best overall. Just because I think they've done a good job drafting in the first round offensively. So maybe they were just much higher on those offensive prospects, and maybe they correctly picked those guys, other than Kyle Pitts, I guess you could say. But I think, I think I would probably overall sell the offensive tackle at 15 stuff. I don't, and, this is going to come back to haunt me. I can already tell. I don't think they're that serious about tackle at 15. It's not a starter. And they have Storm Norton to be the swing, so it's not like they need someone even to come in to be the backup. I think because you have the rest of the offensive line, in terms of the tackles, in place, you've got two starting tackles. And McGarry, McGarry's fine. McGarry is a good right tackle. He's a great run blocker. If he goes up against elite rushers, he will get exposed. But there's only a handful of right tackles that don't get exposed by elite rushers. And, the Falcons, I think part of the problem is they've been sort of loath to help McGarry out with a tight end, and they've basically just left him on an island out there against elite rushers, and that has typically not gone well for this team. So maybe they'll learn from that. I don't know. But at this stage, I will sell tackle at 15. Obviously, after a trade down, then all bets are off, because at that point, it's just going to be whoever the best player is. And if tackles fall, then maybe it could be tackle. It could be safety. On Monday, we had them taking Malachi Starks, who fell to 23. Whatever. But I'll sell it at 15. I will buy it, however, later, because I do think they've been sniffing around a lot of tackles, and I do think that they really would like to draft a tackle. I don't think it's going to be, I think the chances are slightly higher in the second round, but still not high. But I think with the fourth round pick and later, I think the chances of it being a tackle are much, much higher. And I would kind of be surprised if they don't leave the draft with a tackle. I think they will get somebody, whether that's a seventh round sort of dart throw type of guy that they're just hoping to find a diamond in the rough there, or whatever. I think that's sort of, I think they are seriously looking at tackle, but I think 15 is probably too rich. But, I've been wrong. I've been wrong about this before with the Falcons sniffing around offensive players that they ended up taking. So, we'll see. We'll see. I think the next and probably more, exciting rumor is that it's sort of well known around the NFL, apparently, that the Falcons are one of two teams, the other team being the Vikings, that are making it known that they want to trade down. So Adnan, what do you think? Are you buying or selling that this team is an actual is likely to trade down? Not that they necessarily will, because we all know there's a lot that goes into it, but that they're actively trying potentially to trade
Yeah,
down.
I'm definitely buying this one. And look, history says that it's not true. We talked about it, we mentioned it last show. I think the last time the Falcons traded down in the first round was 1990. But history be damned. We go into every draft every year saying, "Oh yeah, I wouldn't mind the Falcons trading down. Get some more swings, get some more cracks at it a little bit." That's what the Patriots did for years under Bill Belichick. They would always trade down. They would always, try to get a few more shuffles with those picks later on. With the Falcons, I'm particularly believing it this year just because of what we led the show with. And it's the fact that this team doesn't really have many draft picks this year. Like, you're down a third, you're down a fifth. Those, third rounder especially can be, an impact player. It can be like a starting player. Hasn't really been an impact
It
player with
can be. Yeah.
no take makes the pick. But I definitely believe that Fontenot and Raheem Morris want, extra chances at, making those picks. And especially this team this year, like, there are a lot of holes on this roster, especially on the defensive side. Now, that goes back to those picks being missed, year in and year out. And it goes back to Terry Fontenot being such a bad drafter overall after the first round. But, I could make the argument that this defense is, missing at least one player on every single level. Like, they could definitely use a linebacker. Talked about pass rush. They could definitely use another corner. I don't know what you feel about, Fuller and who the Falcons just drafted, but they could definitely, maybe get some depth at safety, some depth along the interior. Like, this defensive line or this defense overall looks like a patchwork unit right now. I think that they are definitely less talented than they were last year. And last year they weren't that good either way. So, I can trading back is, it's a decent way to mitigate the losses that you've suffered in when it comes to these picks over the last year. So yeah, I'm definitely a buy on this, and depending on who's there at 15, it could be a very savvy move. It could be a very good move. Like, we don't know. There's some talks of Shedeur Sanders possibly, falling down the draft board. And, if something, I don't think that he'll be there at 15 because the quarterback tax is so great in the NFL. But, if in some way, somehow he falls to 15, that could be a valuable spot for one of these teams behind the Falcons to try and make a move up to get their quarterback. And then the Falcons can utilize that quarterback tax themselves to, maybe extract maximum value out of that pick. Who knows?
Yeah, I mean, Shadur is the obvious one that if he were to still be on the board at 15, that you'd think teams would be clamoring to get up at that point. So that's an option. The issue is with some of those teams, like the Browns in particular. Like, then you're talking about trading out of the first round, which is pretty aggressive. But in this class, it could be a situation where could make sense, given that the depth of the talent versus the high end talent. Like, I'm not sure there's a huge difference between the talent at 25 versus 33, to be honest. Like, I think it's kind of a clump of guys that are all good, but maybe not like top of the first round types. And maybe, the value is better to just pick up additional stuff there. But I also buy this one. I mean, when you're going into the draft with only like 2 top 100 picks and only 3 that aren't 7th rounders, like, and you have no cap space, and you're trying to kind of build up this roster in a meaningful way, not just for this year but for the future. Like, you need those middle round picks, and I think that you could easily pick up a second and like a mid to late day 3 pick, like a fifth, if from going down to like 22, 23, something like that. You could pick up more with a more aggressive trade down, like we've seen floated from like the Browns and the Giants. You're probably trying to get a future first for that move. But at the very least, I think you're getting a future second along with those teams' current seconds and a third, probably another pot sweetener pick in there somewhere. So you can build up your assets for the future as well. It just depends on who's there at the pick. I think I'm absolutely buying that the Falcons are aggressively pursuing a trade down. We don't know if they'll be able to execute it, but I think that this is a spot where this team, I think, has finally decided that they have to get additional picks. They traded a lot away. They ended up losing one stupidly because of Kirk Cousins, and I think they now realize that they have to try to get some picks back through whatever means that they can. And a trade down from 15 into the 20s is probably the best way to accomplish that. I don't think there's a better way. There's also, the potential. I did a mock, I think, last week where I traded down from the second round pick, and, you could pick up maybe like a fourth from that or something. So you can get something additional for a second round trade down. I mean, if you trade down a bunch, you could possibly get a third out of it, right? But it just depends. It depends on who's there. Is this Jackson Dart, Jalen Milroe hype going to launch into the stratosphere? And then you got teams trying to move up for Jackson Dart, which I'm not going to get on that train. But if somebody else wants to, I'll trade the pick. That's fine. Yeah. Robert Kelly just mentioned it in the chat. Don't forget someone coming up for Jackson Dart. So you never know with this quarterback market. I mean, you never know.
Hey, man, look, we know that quarterbacks have been propped up, especially the past few years, we're to the point where there is a legitimate tax. Quarterbacks are always overvalued, more or less, in almost every draft. The one draft being the one a few years ago where the Falcons got Ritter, where, and even then, Kenny Pickett went the first round in that one. So, I mean, yeah, the Steelers, hell of a job by them in that draft. Ritter wasn't good either, but at least we didn't use up a first rounder in that one. So I don't know. You never know what teams may fall in love with what quarterbacks, and then, how it could create some chaos at the top of the draft. And for the Falcons, looking at it be my guest. It is great for the Falcons for there to be as many quarterbacks as possible that go before pick 15. It would be fantastic. Jalen Milroe, Jackson Dart, Cam Ward, of course, Shedeur Sanders. If none of those guys want to fall to 15 and to possibly leverage a team trading up, because the more quarterbacks that go, the more talented players at other positions that are going to be there for the Falcons to possibly take and for the Falcons to possibly trade back from.
Yeah. Yeah. And we can't really, rule out that teams do like quarterbacks, because everybody seems to be jumping on the quarterback hype train. And it only takes one team to value Jackson Dart like a first rounder for a move to be made. And I don't agree with it, but those teams don't give a shit what I think. So, but I think one thing to really emphasize here is that there's a lot of negativity around this Falcons team. We don't have to talk about the Falcons praying that Shedeur falls to 15 or trying to trade up for Shedeur or trying to talk ourselves into Jackson Dart or Jalen Milroe at this point, which is what we'd be doing if the team hadn't taken Michael Penix. So
that's what Saints fans are doing right now.
Right. Yeah. So, as many issues as we have with this front office, with this team, with the things that have happened, we should continue to recognize that the decision to draft Michael Penix, despite being incredibly controversial and sparking enough content to put food on our tables for probably at least 2 months, which I do appreciate that angle, of course, but it ended up being the right call and has protected the Falcons from a truly horrendous quarterback class and being in the unenviable position of trying to find one, which opens the door for this move and potentially If you can now get plus value on pick 15 because you don't need to get a quarterback here and you can trade down, it may end up making that move look even better in hindsight, which we're looking for any good Falcons news, anything we can spin in a positive way at this point. So,
And
do
there
want
haven't
to,
there hasn't been much about since the season ended.
yeah, yeah,
I feel like the peak was that final drive against Washington. Where they up to the point where Raheem Morris didn't call a timeout. And then from there, it's just been like a downward slope from
yeah,
that moment to now.
yeah. No, so we need some positivity here. Maybe the draft is exactly what the doctor ordered. The draft is like universally positive as long as you don't totally blow it, right? So maybe the draft will inject some optimism back into all of us. But yeah, so we're both buying the trade down hype for sure. The next one, it seems like it's quieted down recently, but there was buzz for a while about the potential for Kirk Cousins to be moved during the draft, but potentially other players might be more likely at this point. I don't know if Kirk's gonna be willing to turn around and okay, the Browns didn't draft a quarterback in the first round, so now we can make the trade, or if it's gonna take longer. But other players that could potentially be moved, like Kyle Pitts, or if the Falcons do draft a tackle at 15, maybe Caleb McGarry or whatever. Are you buying or selling the potential for a player to be involved in a draft day trade for the Falcons? We won't put a name on the player. That's a little too specific, but just that a player could be involved in a draft day trade for the Falcons.
I mean, it's always possible, but I'm gonna sell it just because I feel like that's just something that doesn't really happen often. When's the last time for the Falcons that a player has been involved in one of these draft day trades?
I
Uh,
don't remember. Yeah, it's been a long
like
time.
yeah, also looking at just the style, a general manager style, what he normally likes to do, what so some of his habits, so to speak, when it comes to the draft. I mean, we we've seen it with Terry Fontenot. He sort of is a creature of habit to the point where he has his philosophies on draft day. We figured it out in year one that he values RAS score a lot. He values the Senior Bowl guys a lot, and we've noticed it year after year. You can sort of pinpoint what the Falcons may do based on the history of what Terry Fontenot has sort of put on paper over the past four drafts. And not I don't think that there has been a player moved from the Falcons side one time in those 4 years since Terry Fontenot's been in charge. And I just would be hard pressed to imagine that he would go away from that, and that he would do something that would be, in my opinion, completely out of character for him as a general manager and the head decision maker in the war room during the draft. We haven't seen it happen once, so I don't think that it will happen.
Yeah, I think it's not super likely. I would also sell that. I think that Kyle Pitts maybe is more likely than Kirk Cousins at this point, just because I think at this point the thing holding up a Kirk Cousins trade is the salary, which means that it would need to be post June 1st so the Falcons could convert more of the salary to a bonus and pay it off before a trade. So if that's what's holding up this trade, then that's not the draft happening isn't going to change that. It's that might be one stumbling block, right? Is Cousins doesn't want to go somewhere that's going to just draft a quarterback immediately. But I think the other half of that is the Browns in particular probably need the Falcons to eat, I don't know, 10 million of that contract. And keep in mind, 2.5 million of it will be painless to eat essentially. So that will help, but the other 7.5 that will have to come out of the Falcons cap after June 1st, that would be split over this year and next. So you're only taking on, a smaller amount. But I think, yeah, I think after the draft is more likely when we're going to see that. But yeah, I think if I was going to be buying or selling trades happening like post June 1st, I would absolutely buy that. I think that we could see a Cousins trade happen pretty quickly in June, in my opinion. But I don't know if that's not based on any like reporting. I think that's just the likely timeline, and that's what the holdup probably is. And we'll know, I think, for sure. Like, if the Browns don't get any sort of quarterback, I think we can be pretty sure at that point that that the Browns are probably going to be trading for Kirk Cousins once the salary cap number can be tamped down a little bit. So I think we're both going to be selling the player trades during the draft angle. The next topic to cover, and this one, I don't know if I would call this as much a rumor as just like kind of a drumbeat, but I think the first time you and I and some others talked about Mike Green, the edge rusher from Marshall, we all kind of assumed that he was going to be off Atlanta's board due to the allegations against him from high school, and he was also dismissed from the Virginia program over something similar. And I think given what we know about the Falcons, we all assumed that he would be off the board. The rumor mill has since changed quite a bit to now it seems like not only is he seemingly on their board, but they seem extremely interested. I mean, Raheem Morris himself went to his pro day along with the whole range of the scouting staff. So do you buy or sell the notion that Mike Green is in play as a top target for the Falcons now with their first round pick?
Look, emotionally, I'm gonna say I'm buying it just because I want Mike Green. Like he is the guy maybe at the top of my realistic wish list at 15. Look, my opinion on this. I, I don't care. Like, I get it. The off the field stuff is a thing. I feel like the Falcons have sort of handicapped themselves a little bit by putting so much stock into every player's off the field stuff. Like anyone, let's be honest, since the Michael Vick, fiasco happened, Arthur Blank has been so scared of anything else happening that would be catastrophic to the team from an off the field standpoint, that the Falcons have went in like the completely different direction of anyone that has anything off the field, like any issues at all, they just get completely taken off the board. And I feel like that did hurt the team for a little bit there, where I remember in particular that 2013 season, that was just a really, really soft team. And I'm not saying that a player having off the field issues will make him not a soft player or a tough player or anything like that. But I feel like it's been 18 years, 19 years since the Michael Vick stuff happened. Like it's time to sort of get over it. And as long as it's nothing like super super catastrophic like off the field issues, like there are different levels of off the field stuff that happen. I'm not going to fully take a player off the board, and I'm against fully taking a player off the board because of some off the field issues. Like in that case, the Falcons, were correct to pass on Micah Parsons in the Kyle Pitts draft. Like I would much rather have Micah Parsons, even though he had some of those like issues in the locker room at Penn State. And I mean Dallas hasn't really regretted that pick at all. Philadelphia hasn't regretted the Jordan Davis pick at all. He's a guy that was sort of linked to the Falcons for a little bit, but a guy that the Falcons may have fully taken off of their board. I'm completely, and I am buying it given the fact that Raheem Morris is at the pro day. No offense to the Marshall football team, but I don't know who else they would be there for.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, maybe it's one of the guys for one of those seventh rounders, but yeah, I mean, where there's smoke, there's fire, and I'm not discounting these visits. because I feel like I discounted the visits last year with Penix, and it really sort of bit me in the ass a little bit.
Yeah, that was a wake up call. Um, yeah, I think obviously any sexual assault allegations should be taken seriously.
And
And
also, I'm sorry, Corey Davis. Yeah, I meant Jalen Carter, not Jordan
yeah,
Davis.
yeah,
I
yeah.
got my players mixed up.
Great UGA players that the Falcons passed mixed up. Yeah. But no, like to preface all of this, like obviously sexual assault allegations are very serious and should be investigated thoroughly before a player is put on the Falcons board. But in this situation, this is like a private investigator, like team intel sort of thing. Like there's nothing that any of us could be able to dig up without going down that road to come up with an answer one way or the other. So all we can really weigh in on, all that we can really weigh in on at this point is the tape, because that's what I can evaluate. But again, so that makes it up to the Falcons. Do you trust the Falcons to be able to properly evaluate those allegations and trust that, they're not going to happen again at the best, right at worst, or that, that they don't, I don't know. I don't know what they're going to come away with that, but based on what we've seen, it doesn't seem like he's taken off the board. So I think we have to buy that they're very much, considering Mike Green, on the field. I think Mike Green is an outstanding prospect that checks a ton of boxes for what you want in an edge rusher. Other than length, that's kind of the one that he doesn't check for me. But I love the tape. I love what we saw from the Senior Bowl. So it's up to the Falcons to determine really if he's on their board. And if he is, I certainly hope they've done their due diligence on this, because they have access to way more information than any of us do. So if, based on what I've heard, it seems like they have done their due diligence, at least from what I've heard. And people seem to think that they've come away from that investigating, feeling pretty good about Mike Green going forward and all that stuff. So based on that, I have to sort of buy that he is absolutely on their board and in contention for pick 15, or, perhaps even after a trade down, depending on how the rest of the NFL views him. But based on the tape, great prospect at 15. Think he can be a phenomenal football player. And it's really up to these NFL teams to do the work and make sure they're doing it right. But unfortunately, we don't have access to that information. It would be very helpful if we did. But unfortunately, we just have to go off of reporting and all that. So, but yeah. So definitely, I think we're both buying that Mike Green is probably very high on their board, and definitely in consideration at this stage. I did want to touch on, this is one that was based on Trevor Sikkema. Love you, Trevor. Trevor Sikkema has wide receiver as one of the Falcons' top draft needs, and seems to be of the mind that the Falcons are likely to draft one. Now, Trevor does cover the Bucs, but he also is a big NFC South guy, has a lot of ties to the NFC South, knows how to scout for these NFC South teams. Do you buy that wide receiver is higher potentially on Atlanta's board than we've given it credit for, and that there is a chance of a wide receiver pick occurring, not counting the 7th rounders, because they can do whatever they want. They can do whatever they want with the 7th rounders.
Are we talking about a special teamer in the 7th round, or
we'll say 4th rounder or higher to wide receiver? Are you buying or selling that's a realistic possibility here?
Look, man, I'm selling. I'm selling no to a wide receiver. I get it. Maybe there's some, good wide receivers, or maybe there's a good wide receiver that falls. This team has too many holes on the defense. And if you're going to use a pick on non-defense, then, use it to solidify the offensive line, use it on the center. Wide receiver is not a position of need. Not this year. Like, you have Drake London, who we're hoping continues his ascension, and whom we're hoping, enters maybe that echelon of the, maybe even the top 5 wide receivers in the league. I think there's an argument to be made that he's top 10 already. Darnell Mooney is a great wide receiver too. He maybe one of the best wide receiver twos in the NFL. I don't know what they're gonna do with Kyle Pitts, but we've been calling for them to not use him as a traditional tight end year in and year out now. So maybe they, use him more so in that role of in that like wide receiver type role that we've seen other great tight ends used in, like Travis Kelce, for example. Um, Wide receiver, Ray McLeod is still there. Wide receiver was not an issue for you last year. I don't think that wide receiver is, even on the top 5 of your most needed positions on this football team. Like, if this defense was a lot better and, if there was a lot more depth, I'd be like, yeah, like, you have the luxury. This team does not have the luxury to make a wide receiver pick with one of their, 3 draft picks that they have in the first 4 rounds. Like, it would just be a waste of resources. And, I get it. Fontenot has wasted resources in the past.
Not beating the allegations yet.
Which is why, like, I'm just trying to like talk the logic like out of me right now and saying, yeah, of course it's not going to happen. But then there's always that part of me that's like, yeah, this dude may fall in love with another skill position player and he may just pull the trigger because that's what we've seen year in and year out.
Yeah. I think at this point, I'm also going to be selling that one. I think that I don't think there's much actual smoke around the Falcons targeting receiver. They really haven't visited with any like big time receivers. I mean, they're going to be sniffing around guys. I have no doubt about that. Probably more like day 3 targets and stuff like that. But they just, I don't think it's a priority for them. I think this team is probably they backed themselves into the corner of having to take defense, right? I mean, by what they've done the last several years. Like you said, they've got Drake London and Darnell Mooney locked up, theoretically long term, at least for a few years. Drake London, I think we all know isn't going anywhere. But Mooney they have for at least another several years. And then Ray was fine as a wide receiver 3. You could definitely upgrade that spot. And this would be a great spot to upgrade wide receiver 3 if the defense had been, settled previously, right? If they had succeeded in addressing the defense with these day 2 picks previously, this could have been a spot where you could add Emeka Egbuka to boost, your size and your run blocking and your route running, basically give you like a souped up Ray McLeod that's gonna, just be a much more red zone focused wide receiver 3 that would give you this elite trio. Or you could go the Luther Burden the third route and go for like another souped up version of Ray McLeod that's just crazy yards after catch and trying to add this really dynamic element, outside of these guys. But they can't, right? They can't take that luxury because the wide receiver room is fine and the defense is drowning, right? I mean, we're absolutely drowning. So there's just not any way I think they could justify that. I don't think, and like as much as I do actually really like Emeka Egbuka in particular, like I don't think the value there, like I think, assuming Starks or Mike Green or Jahdae Barron is there, I think I will have all of those 3 guys ahead of Egbuka on my big board, regardless of, positional value or whatever. I just think those guys are better prospects, even though I really like him. It's just like, I don't really see a scenario where that's going to be top of the board or like work. Now, if they have some kind of crazy trade down, again, all bets are kind of off if they pick up like 3 additional picks and do like say they trade out of the first round with the Browns and all this and something crazy like that. And they're picking at 33 and they're like, oh, well, look, Luther Burden fell to 33. All right. Well, who are we to say no to that, right? Like it depends on who's there, and you have to throw a lot of stuff out if it gets that crazy. But I think overall, like, unless this team adds like a bunch of picks or something, I think we have to sell the notion that they're going to be really considering wide receiver high. And I would, I would fundamentally disagree with Trevor's take that wide receiver is like a big need for this team at all. I think it's a luxury need that you could upgrade Ray McLeod, but your wide receiver 1 and 2 are very good, and I think you're more than satisfied with those two. Penix has already shown a lot of chemistry with them, and you're also paying a lot of money to Kyle Pitts on his 5th-year option, and it's like you either have to trade him or plan to use him in a way that's commensurate with that sort of paycheck, right? So I assume they're going to be trying to get him more involved if he sticks around. So that's sort of my take. So I think we're both selling the idea that wide receiver is actually a major need and going to be addressed early in this draft. I don't know if there were any specific rumors that you wanted to touch on, Adnan. I think I saw some in the chat I was going to go look for too, but did want to give you an opportunity if there was one that you wanted to talk about specifically.
No, nothing that's coming off the top of mind. I think you hit on, I think we hit, 4 of them? 3 or 4 of them. So, it's silly season after all. Like, we can talk about the Falcons possibly trading for TJ Watt. Like,
I'll have that conversation.
He had that cryptic Instagram like post today of him, like, from what it looked like, it's incited a panic in Steeler Nation. So, let's. Hey, man,
buying or selling TJ Watt coming to Atlanta.
I'm buying TJ. Hey, am I Thomas Dimitroff in 2017 to sell him? No. Am I Jeff Ulbrich? Oh, too bad Jeff Ulbrich's on this team, actually. Or, he's now the defensive coordinator. Yeah. Maybe he'll talk the Falcons out of TJ Watt again, like he did on draft night. But yeah, hey, well, you know what, Steele? If you guys want our entire draft, package every pick we have. Kevin, you and I will take 3 nights off, or maybe we'll have a 2-hour show just talking about how great TJ Watt is.
Just vibe out, yeah.
Draft show. So yeah, I'd be down for that.
Yeah, don't actually think TJ Watt's coming here or anywhere. I don't know. I try not to look too much into cryptic Instagram posts, but I do enjoy the idea of TJ Watt ending up in Atlanta. Same with Micah Parsons, if we're going to include that, or Trey Hendrickson for that matter. Micah Parsons is top of the list. TJ Watt second, Trey Hendrickson third, but all of them definitely high atop my list of potential, fantasy trades that we.
I imagine TJ Watt is just trying to put some pressure on, and when it comes to contracts, because this would be the last year of his contract. I think the guaranteed money is all up. I mean, he's a very large cap hit $30 million again this year. But yeah, this just reeks of Julio Jones taking all of his Falcons posts down, looking for a new contract. In what was it, 2018?
Yep.
2019, something like that.
The Falcon for life year.
Yeah, the Falcon. I still remember that. I was so against giving him that contract, but nobody listens to me. But yeah, I'm imagining he's just trying to publicly sort of put some pressure on Pittsburgh for a new contract, which, let's be honest, he'll probably eventually get.
Probably. Yeah, I think so. We did have a question from Alex Foster with the $5. Alex, thank you so much, man. Appreciate you. Asking, if we don't trade back in round 1, would it still be worth it to trade back in the second, depending on what we can get? Yeah, Alex, I don't know if you saw the mock I did. I think it was last Friday. I did a second round trade down, and it was like relatively large trade down. I think I was able to get a third out of it. So that is like a backup option, I would say. Like that it is an option if they can't trade down in round 1, to try and maybe do a second round trade down. I mean, that's what it ended up costing for the Falcons to trade up for Rook last year, was a third. So, we know it's possible to get a third out of it. So yes, I do think it's worth it to trade back in the second. Depending on how far you go, you might be able to get a third. But if you're only going back a little bit, probably a fourth, which is also good. Like, I mean, they could use the picks. I don't really care. If you trade back 5 spots and get a fourth and maybe a sixth or something, then I'm happy with that for sure. They need, they need picks. So the second round is absolutely another spot where they can trade back and potentially get some actual assets. It just depends on how aggressive the trade down is and who's trying to come up and what the situation is and all that. But yeah, I think it's worth it to trade down in the second for sure. Um, yeah. So we speaking of trades, we did have a question from Robert Kelly talking about a couple rumors that if Abdul Carter were to fall, the Falcons would actually consider trading up, either with the Jets or something similar. So we wanted to buy the rumor that the Falcons were considering strongly trading down from 15. But what about the flip side of that? That the Falcons actually would consider trading up aggressively for the top overall edge rusher in Abdul Carter if he were to fall, say, to like 7-ish in this class.
I mean, it would depend on the price, but I mean, like, look, like that trading up is also a luxury that this team cannot afford. However, Bill Carter is really good. Like, he's like one of those blue chip guys that could possibly be worth it. But I don't know, that's a tough one. Like, I feel like I would. Like, I feel like I would definitely. I'll consider it depending on what would be the asking price. If it's a first rounder next year, no. Like there because I just think that there's too much that could go wrong this season for this team to be gambling by giving, possibly moving that first rounder for anything next year. Um, if it's like a first and a second in like this year's second or maybe next year's second, maybe possibly. I mean, who knows? Maybe they could even dangle Kyle Pitts, and we could go back on that whole like, oh well, the Falcons trade a player type thing. But yeah, if it's for Abdul Carter, I would definitely consider it, depending on what the asking price is.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And, um, you know, at this point, I mean, I would love to get Abdul Carter. He's a blue chipper in my opinion. Um, I I think if we were to see Carter like actually fall that far, I imagine there would be something else going on that would precipitate that fall. So in that case, it may not be as much of a slam dunk, right? I mean, if everyone else before the Jets and apparently including the Jets, if they're willing to trade out, is willing to pass on a blue chipper, that would give me a lot of pause. Like I'd want to know why we would be in that situation. But yeah, I mean, I think if you have the opportunity to get Carter, you have to at least explore it. I think I would sell the like realisticness of this whole scenario, but I think if he were to fall to 7, then you have to at least make the call and figure out what it's going to take, if only to keep him from going to the Saints, right? I mean, that would be worth a call no matter what. But yeah, I think at this stage, I think it's very unlikely that Carter falls, and I think the price would probably be too high for the Falcons to be able to do it either way. Um, but yeah, it would certainly be interesting if that were to happen because right now he's like a top 4 lock. It seems like. So I'm curious to. I would. It would definitely shake up the top of the draft. No doubt about it. It would be interesting to look at. All right. Well, we'll close out tonight's show with just a simple topic. And because we haven't had you on over the last month, I want to know who your guy is in this class. Is it Mike Green? Is it someone else? Like, who's your guy right now that you have circled that this is the guy that you think you like and also think that this person has a high chance of ending up in Atlanta, assuming they stay at like 15. We don't have to get into like crazy scenarios. So assuming they pick at 15, like who's your guy right now that you've got circled?
Oh yeah, it's Mike Green. It's I'm in love with the tools. Like he has multiple pass rush moves, wrestling background, high motor. He has very good size. Like I feel like this could be the guy that you can sort of. I mean, if he obviously reaches his potential, this could be the guy you sort of build a pass rush around, like a guy that can really sort of anchor a defensive line along the edge. It's something that the Falcons have not had since John Abraham. And yeah, I feel like if not for some of the off the field concerns, we wouldn't even be talking about, the possibility of him being there at 15. Um, So I'm definitely buying the idea of buying him at a discount. And I feel like this is one of those players that really uh, can be a shot in the arm for your defense and for your defensive line in particular.
Yeah, no, I love Mike Green, the football player. He's definitely the edge rusher that I have circled for the Falcons. I do think if for whatever reason Mike Green's not there or whatever, I do think the second guy I would bring up is Malachi Starks. I think Starks is also in, like, I would say the top trio of guys, or like the top targets for this team. We've heard the coaching staff sort of rave about him and his workouts and everything. And I think Starks is just a great pick because he can fill so many roles for this team depending on what you need. I do think, like, long term he's a safety for you, and I think he'll be a great safety. I think short term he could be a slot corner for you. He could be, no matter, you could be any safety. I mean, the way that Starks moves, I mean, nothing's really off the table for him, but I think those are the two spots where he's likely to play. But I think adding him gets you another, like, elite secondary player. And I think if Mike Green is gone at 15, you know, you're probably deciding between, like, a bunch of the sort of tier 2 to 3 edge guys like James Pierce and Donovan Ezeraku, and guys more like Shamar Stewart, Michael Williams. Those guys are all good, but I don't know that I would put them on the same level as Starks, who I think is a blue chip safety. I think all these other guys are sort of tier 2 edge rushers, in my opinion. I think you'd also be looking at maybe like Janae Barron if he's there. I know some people really love Will Johnson. I don't quite have Will Johnson as a blue chip guy. I don't think I'm going to end up being as high on him. I just think he has some limitations, which is fine. He could still be a CB1 maybe in a certain scheme, but I think I wouldn't take him over Barron or Mike Green or Starks. I think those guys are all blue chippers to me. So those are guys I personally have higher. But I think the top two for me would be Mike Green and Malachi Starks. So I agree with you there. And then I know we had a question from Brandon asking about Raheem Morris's comment that the Falcons need to draft defense, but they won't force it in the first round. And me personally don't really think much about that comment, but I'm curious if you took anything from that, Adnan.
No, I think it's just coach speak. Like, you don't want to give anything away in the media of what you're planning on doing. Look, the entire NFL knows that the Falcons need defense. That's not a secret. That's not like, some divine wisdom that Raheem Morris is bestowing upon the media right now. But I feel like this is more so Morris trying to reel it back a little bit and say, hey, well, maybe we don't get a defensive player, which is exactly what he should be doing right now. There's no reason for to tip your hand at all to the media or to any other football team, because at the end of the day, the draft is the game within the game. It's a game of poker, and the worst thing you can do is show your cards to other teams about like what you want to do and what you're planning on doing. So yeah, Fontenot, Blank, Morris, like I don't want to hear anything in the media leading up to the draft that gives away any of what the Falcons might do. Like that would just be self-destructive.
Yeah, I think like Adnan said, it's mostly coach speak. I think Brandon. I think it kind of goes without saying most of the time that, like, I don't think the Falcons are just gonna force defense because they have to. I just think in this class there are so many good defensive players that will be there at 15. Like, there's not really a scenario that I see where there won't be at least one really intriguing defensive player there. I think there's definitely a situation where, like, Green's gone and Janae Barron's gone and Malachi Starks are gone, and those are the top 3 guys in my opinion. But at that point, you're probably looking at Kenneth Grant still being a possibility. If you're a Will Johnson fan, that's a possibility. I think obviously at that point, a bunch of offensive tackles will probably still be there. So you could either pivot and like I will say, like, if Armand Membu, like, for some reason fell to 15, that's the one tackle I would really not want to pass on. Career right tackle, elite tackle prospect, in my opinion. I don't know if I'll have him as like a blue chip guy, but he'll be close. So to me, like, if those top defenders were gone and Membu was still there, that's the one tackle that I would actually consider drafting. But otherwise, I don't think you're gonna have to really like force an offensive pick, because I think there's just so many good defenders. And like, I'm still okay with, like, if you can't trade down and those top guys are gone, like, I still think you would be okay with like Michael Williams or James Pierce. Like, I still think those guys are worthy of that pick. It's just not the plus value that you'd like to see. I think you could probably also be happy with those guys after a trade down, but you know, not everyone, you might not be able to. And at that point, I think you got to pivot and have something else. You know, maybe Jahad Campbell falls. I know he is very popular. You know, there are options. And Brandon Brass asks if I prefer Nick Skorton or Ezeraku. I actually prefer Skorton, and I think that's maybe a hot take, it seems like, compared to some people. But when I watch Ezeraku, I see a better Arnold Ebiketie, and like, I think Arnold Ebiketie is actually probably gonna maybe end up justifying his second round pick by the time his like contract's done, like, especially if he has a good year this year. But I think, like, we've seen with Ebiketie, kind of the limitations of that body type. They have a very similar build. And I think Ezeraku's more polished than Ebiketie was when he came out, although I do think Ebiketie was pretty polished as well. That to me just kind of, I'm a little worried about that. Like, I don't know if Ezeraku's ceiling is worth 15. I think he will be a good designated pass rusher, but his ability to play the run is limited. And I just don't know if that's worth a top 20 pick. Now, if it's a trade down or something, sure. I do think the nice thing about Ezeraku is he's probably going to hit the ground running and be able to be like a designated pass rusher as a rookie. But yeah, to me, I would go for Skorton, because I think Skorton has the more pro-ready build. I think he played too heavy at Texas A&M, and it hurt his game. He's a very good run defender. He's surprisingly polished. I think if he's playing at 260, I want Skorton. I think Skorton's very intriguing and super underrated. Now, this is a guy that was a top 10, guy in the summer who played too heavy and didn't have great production. He dropped 20 pounds for the combine, looked pretty spry to me. So I'm willing to kind of overlook the bad production. And I like Skorton a lot. But yeah, anything else you want to add, Adnan, before we sign off tonight?
No, I think we covered a lot of the rumors. Just couple more? Is it two more shows before the draft happens?
Yeah,
or
two more Wednesdays. Yeah, just two more Wednesdays.
Wow.
Yeah.
And
Crazy.
then after that second Wednesday, it's immediately the next day. The 24th is the draft. So,
yep.
man, time does fly. Before you know it, we'll be talking ourselves into another, into another division title that we haven't won since 2016. So
can't wait yet. No, it's it's interesting stuff. I'm excited to see what happens. And definitely, guys, we will of course have our traditional live mock draft on the Wednesday before the draft. That is tradition. We'll have a lot of fun with that, I'm sure. I believe we're gonna have Eric Robinson delivering his finest draft takes next Wednesday. So a little reunion show. I'm going to try to get Mark Ramundi back on before the draft, try to get Trevor Sikkema on here so he can defend his wide receiver takes. We'll get a bunch of good shows to you guys. Obviously, we'll have Trayshawn on for Tuesday takes as well during that time period. So thanks so much for joining us, guys. Please like and subscribe if you haven't done so already. Especially subscribing really helps the channel grow. Appreciate everyone who's done that so far. Leave a 5-star review on your podcast platform of choice for all you audio enjoyers. If you want to support the show, you can do so patreon.com/Falcoholic Live, or you can join up with the YouTube channel memberships here. Guys, really appreciate you. Appreciate MyBookie for sponsoring the show. We will see you guys. I'll have another show for you guys on Friday. I think I'm going to do something about my favorite sort of value picks in every round of the draft for this team. I think that's kind of what I'm leaning on. We'll go from there. So thank you guys so much for hanging out with us tonight on Falcoholic Live. Thanks again to Adnan for for coming on and co-hosting with me. We will see you guys next time on the show. Have a great night, folks. We'll see you.